That I'm going to actually go on my channel to see if anybody's there yet. Drop a link in the damn. I mean, it says I'm live, but I can't find my damn link to my damn live stream. The fuck? Sometimes I think I'm way too old for this shit.
Gala King already liked it.
Hello, Thrax. Yeah. All right, let's see. Let's put this thing on Twitter and see how many more people we can get in here. Ah.
Gala King already liked it.
Hello, Thrax. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes. Let's put this thing on Twitter and see how many more people we can get in here. Ah. Hey, Finn. Yeah, I'm probably gonna have to get with you later to figure out how this crap works. Because I kept getting a reverb on XSplit. Good morning. All right, let's see how we're going to do this today. That means I'm actually gonna have to turn my camera on. All right, camera should be on. And let me open up the AP app. Yes. Now, if the graphics are crappy and you can't see it, there's a reason for that. And the reason is because my computer sucks. So I will be reading it. And while I'm reading it, Ronan is going to be managing the chat because I can't see the chat when I'm in the app. All right, let's see. World news. Okay, here we go. Oh, there's the timeline. All right. So I am going to be reading the timeline like I did on Fenn's show last night. And I'm going to link to that show down at the bottom when the live stream's over with. So these are all Eastern Standard Times. This is the Associated Press out of Beirut. So these times are Beirut times. Sorry, correction. So this is all happening in Beirut, and all the times I am about to read you are the time relative to that area. So at 5:50 a.m., Israel's prime minister has welcomed the U.S. attack on Syrian air base, saying he fully supports President Trump's decision. Benjamin Netanyahu said Friday in a statement that, quote, in both word and action, unquote, Trump, quote, sent a strong and clear message, unquote, that, quote, the use and spread of chemical weapons will not be tolerated, unquote. Israel's Channel 2 TV said Israel, along with other allies, was notified about the U.S. strike. The attacks in neighboring Syria have worried Israel, which was warned against game-changing, and that was in quotes, weapons reaching Hezbollah in Lebanon from the country, which supports the militant group. Last month, Israel shot down an anti-aircraft missile fired at its planes as they struck a suspected Hezbollah weapons convoy. Israel also treated several thousand Syrians wounded in fighting and provided humanitarian aid to some Syrian communities near the Israeli frontier and the Golan Heights. 7:30 a.m. Next update. Let me see. A Syrian official tells the Associated Press that the U.S. missile attack that hit a number of military targets in central Syria has left a number of dead and wounded. Talal Barazi, the governor of Homs province, didn't say how many were killed in the early Friday attack. He said a fire raged in the air base in Homs for over an hour following the barrage of missiles. Barazi says the evacuation and transfer of casualties is ongoing. He called the air base, which is about 45 kilometers, which is 25 miles for us here in the States, east of the city of Homs, a supporting base for Syria's fight against terrorism. Islamic State group militants operate in the central Homs province. Activists and rebels say the base serves as one of the government's most active launching pad for airstrikes on all rebel areas in central and northern Syria. Syria's government calls all armed groups terrorists. The attack came in fiery retaliation for this week's gruesome chemical weapons attack against civilians. 7:45 a.m. Russia's foreign ministry says it is preparing a statement regarding U.S. strikes on Syrian base. Shortly before the strikes, the head of the Information Policy Commission in the upper house of Russian parliament, Alexei Pushkov, said on Twitter that if Trump launches a military action in Syria, it would put him in the same league with Bush and Obama. Russian Deputy Envoy to the United Nations, Vladimir Safrankov, said Russia had warned the U.S. to think about what military actions have led to in Iraq, Libya, and other countries, according to the Interfax news agency. 7:55. Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull says the Australian government strongly supports the swift and just response of the United States in launching a rocket attack on Syrian air base. He tells reporters in Sydney on Friday this was a collaborated, proportionate, and targeted response. It sends a strong message to the Assad regime and has been struck at the very airfield from which the chemical attack was delivered. But we are not at war with the Assad regime, and the United States have made it clear they are not seeking to overthrow the Assad regime, he added. 8 o'clock Beirut time. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations says the U.S. sent a significant message to the region and beyond with the attack on a Syrian air base. Danny Danon told Channel 10 TV it was a moral decision that delivered a triple message. He said it told the Syrians to stop using chemical weapons and sent a message to Iran and North Korea. He said it also told the international community that if the UN is incapable of acting in these situations, it will lead. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said earlier, this message of resolve in the face of the Assad regime's horrific actions will resonate not only in Damascus, but in Tehran, Pyongyang, and elsewhere. Israel's military says it was notified of the strike. 8:10 a.m. Beirut time. A Syrian opposition monitor says the U.S. missile attack on an airbase in the country center has killed at least 4 Syrian soldiers, including a general, and caused extensive damage. The head of the Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the early Friday missile attack damaged over 100 hangars, a fuel depot, and an air defense base. About 60 U.S. Tomahawk missiles hit the Shayrat Air Base southeast of Homs, a small installation with 2 runways. A Syrian official, the attack caused deaths and fire, but did not elaborate. The U.S. attack came in fiery retaliation to Tuesday's deadly chemical attack that officials said used chlorine mixed with a nerve agent, possibly sarin. More than 80 were killed in that attack that drew the wide international condemnation. 8:20 a.m. Beirut time. A senior Russian lawmaker says that U.S. strike on Syria likely has put an end to hopes for Russia-U.S. cooperation in Syria. Konstantin Kosachev, the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Kremlin-controlled upper house of parliament, said on his Facebook that the prospective U.S.-Russian anti-terror coalition has been, quote, put to rest without even being born, unquote. Kosachev added that it's a pity, suggesting that Trump had been pressured to act by the Pentagon. He added that while, quote, Russian cruise missiles strike the terrorists, U.S. missiles strike Syrian government forces who are spearheading the fight against the terrorists, unquote. 8:25 a.m. Beirut time. Saudi Arabia is praising the courageous decision by U.S. President Donald Trump to launch missile strikes on Syria over a deadly chemical weapons attack. A statement carried by the state-run Saudi press agency on Friday firmly blames the government, of embattled Syrian President Bashar Assad for the chemical weapons attack. The Saudi Foreign Ministry said the missile launched by Trump was the right response to the crimes of this regime to its people in light of the failure of the international community to stop it. Sunni-ruled Saudi Arabia is a longtime opponent of Assad and has supported the rebels fighting against him. It also views the long-running war as a proxy conflict between it and its Middle East arch-rival, the Shiite power Iran. Let me see. 7:45 a.m. Okay, 7:45 a.m. Beirut time. I think they kind of mistyped the timeline here. Iran has condemned the U.S. missile strike on Syria, saying the unilateral action is dangerous, destructive, and violates the principles of international law.
Red said clank.
Oh. Yo. Yeah. Does he want to link in? What?
Wait, Pat.
Okay.
Your boy Pat's here too.
Oh, wow. If any of you guys want a link to the chat, let me know. I'll be more than happy to DM you with it, or probably put it, since most of the B-list people and, you know, are robots. Sure. All right, cool. I'll put it in the group DM. Let me see here. And all right, robot, it's in the group DM. Okay, Pat, that's cool. I just felt that it'd be better to read the timeline straight from the wire than try and look for all kinds of sources and correlate the stuff. Let me see if this works. So that's obviously there's a glitch in the timeline, but I'm reading it directly from the article. So as I see it, I'm reading it, and I keep saying Beirut time for anybody that pops in and doesn't realize where the time frame is coming from.
Good morning, news nerds, and welcome once again to another report of the world going completely to shit. Back to you, Madwoman.
All right. All right, Iran. Okay, we did that part. That's according to Foreign Ministry spokesman Bahram Ghassemi. He made the comments in a report carried Friday by the semi-official ISNA news agency. I like how they call that semi-official. Iran is one of the biggest supporters of embattled Syrian President Bashar Assad. Its hardline paramilitary Revolutionary Guard is deeply involved in the war. America's Sunni Arab allies in the Gulf view Syria as a proxy conflict between it and Shiite power Iran. Ghassemi described Iran as, quote, the biggest victim of chemical weapons in recent history, unquote, referencing Iraqi use of the weapons during its 1980s war with the Islamic Republic. He said Iran condemned the missile launch, quote, regardless of the perpetrators and the victims, unquote, of Tuesday's chemical weapons attack in Syria. He also warned it would strengthen terrorists and further add to the complexity of the situation in Syria and the region.
What?
What?
I do believe he used the stock and trade, strengthen the terrorists, and add complexity arguments, which are trotted out every time the United States does anything, or if it does nothing. Very good. Very good.
All right, 8:50 a.m. Beirut time. A Syrian official tells the Associated Press that the U.S. missile attack that hit military targets in central Syria has killed 3 soldiers and 2 civilians. Talal Barazi, I'm glad I'm reading these things right, the governor of Homs province, said 7 others were wounded in the early Friday attack. He had earlier said a fire raged in the air base in Homs for over an hour following the barrage of missiles. A Syrian opposition monitor said the attack killed 4 soldiers, including a general. The attack came in fiery retaliation for this week's gruesome chemical weapons attack against civilians. 9 a.m. A survivor of the chemical attack in a northern Syrian town says he hopes the U.S. missile attack could help put an end to Syrian government airstrikes, creating a safe area for civilians. Ala al-Youssef, a 27-year-old resident of Khan Shikun, said Friday the U.S. missile attack alleviates a small part of our sufferings, but he worries it will be like anesthetics to save face. Al-Yusuf said the U.S. is capable of paralyzing Syrian warplanes. What good is a strike on Sharat Air Base alone while we have more than 15 other air bases, he said. Al-Yusuf lost at least 25 relatives in this week's gruesome chemical attack in Khan Shikun. The Syrian government denies it was behind the attack, believed to have deployed chemical weapons.
Because as we all know, no Middle Eastern government actually has any chemical weapons unless it was Saddam in the 80s. After that, somehow they all vanish and they never really occur.
Exactly. Honey, I'm going to need some more sugar for my coffee. 9:20 a.m. Beirut time. The Kremlin says President Vladimir Putin believes that the U.S. strike on Syrian air base is an aggression against a sovereign state in violation of international law. Putin's spokesman
I should point out that Vladimir Putin, of all people, would know. He knows it when he sees it. He's practiced it often himself.
Yeah, no kidding. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said in Friday's statement carried by Russian news agencies that Putin believes that the U.S. has dealt the strikes under far-fetched pretext. Russia has argued that the death of civilians in the Syrian town of Khan Shikun on Tuesday resulted from Syrian forces hitting a rebel chemical arsenal there. Peskov said that the U.S. has ignored past incidents of the use of chemical weapons by Syrian rebels. He argued that the Syrian government has destroyed its chemical weapons stockpiles under international control.
Naturally, because we always believe these Middle Eastern regimes whenever they tell us they've done exactly what they were asked to do, because they've always done that so concisely, correctly, and thoroughly in the past.
Turkey has welcomed the U.S. missile strike on Syria, saying it was an important and meaningful development, but called for a continued tough stance against President Bashar Assad that would render him no longer able to harm his people. Deputy Prime Minister Numan Kurtulmus said in a live television interview Friday, it is imperative that the Assad regime is fully punished by the international community. We see the airstrikes as positive, but we believe that this should be completed, Kurtulmus said. The Assad regime's barbarism must immediately be stopped. Kurtulmus added that he hoped the U.S. action would help accelerate peace efforts in Syria. Turkey is a strong opponent of Syrian President Bashar Assad and has backed the Syrian opposition fighting against him.
By the way, I should mention that this news week has allowed us to put a lot of names into the circulation that will make it much, much easier to win Scrabble.
Yeah, no kidding.
And here's something that's just in from stock and everything. Apparently, the truck used in today's terror attack, where a delivery truck actually rammed into a department store, was stolen from a brewery. That's alcohol abuse, and these fuckers need to go to meetings.
All right, 9:40 a.m. Beirut time. A communication link between the U.S. and Russia used to protect their pilots flying sorties over Syria was used ahead of an American missile strike on the country. The so-called deconfliction line is operated by the U.S. military central command at the sprawling Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. It serves as a crucial link to make sure the increasingly crowded Syrian airspace doesn't see any accidental collisions or attacks on each other. Pentagon spokesman Captain Jeff Davis says U.S. military planners took precautions to minimize risk to Russian or Syrian personnel located at the airfield targeted in Syria's Homs province. U.S. Central Command did not immediately respond to an Associated Press query on specifics on how the line was used. About 60 U.S. Tomahawk missiles launched early Friday hit the Shirat Air Base southeast of the city of Homs, a small installation with 2 runways. The attack came in response for the chemical weapons attack Tuesday in Syria. Let's see.
Also providing a welcome chance to test weapons that we haven't used in about a decade.
Yeah, pretty much. All right.
Better to use than assholes.
Yeah. 10:25 Beirut time AM. Syrian military says the U.S. missile attack on one of its air bases in central Syria has killed 6 and caused extensive damage, calling it an aggression that undermines Damascus's counterterrorism operations. The statement read on TV Friday came hours after the U.S. sent nearly 60 Tomahawk missiles into the Shirat Air Base. The first American attack against the Syrian army since the war started in 2011. Ali Mahoub, Syrian army spokesman, said Washington has used the chemical attack in the northern town of Khan Shikoun earlier this week as a pretext to carry out the blatant aggression without knowing what really happened. Syria blames the opposition fighters of stockpiling chemical weapons.
As we all know, international sources are great at finding chemical weapons or not finding them when they're not there or finding them when they are there.
That's correct.
I'm just saying, we might have had some ambiguity just from the beginning.
Update: 7 dead, 25 wounded.
Over there in Stockholm?
No, in
Syria?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm still reading the timeline, so we'll probably get there. 10:35 a.m. Beirut. Indonesia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs says it's concerned by the unilateral foreign actions in Syria, including the U.S. attack on Thursday night. Ministry spokesman Indonesia rejects the use of chemical weapons for any purpose and condemns a chemical weapons attack in Syria earlier this week that killed dozens of civilians. But it did not praise Donald Trump's retaliation against the government of Syria's President Bashar Assad. Nasir says, "We are also very concerned by unilateral actions that have been taken by many parties, including the recent launch of Tomahawks in response to the use of chemical weapons."
We will translate this for the U.S. audience. Indonesia is trying to be important once again for no damn good reason.
At the same time, 10:35 Beirut time, Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe expressed support for the U.S. missile attack on Syrian government-controlled air base. Abe on Friday said Japan understood and supported the U.S. strategy, saying the strikes were a means to prevent further deterioration of the situation, referring to the suspected chemical attack. About 60, okay, well, they're repeating the 60 things. And they said a small installation with 2 runways where aircraft often take off to bomb targets in northern and central Syria. I got to read ahead a little bit because it's starting to repeat itself, and I don't want to sound like a broken record. 10:45 a.m. Beirut time. Russia says it's suspending a deal with the U.S. to prevent mid-air collisions over Syria in response to the U.S. strike on a Syrian air base. The Russian Foreign Ministry said in Friday's statement that Moscow is suspending a memorandum with the U.S. to prevent incidents and ensure flight safety. Oops. Under the memorandum signed after Russia launched an air campaign in Syria in September 2015, Russia and the U.S. had exchanged information about their flights to avoid incidents in the crowded skies over Syria. Russia has several dozen warplanes and batteries of air defense missiles at its base in Syria. Because,
pot calling kettle black over unilateral action has decided to no longer cooperate us because of our unilateral reaction with their unilateral action. Got it.
Anti-immigrant sentiment to the presidency next month.
I think she's gotten this slightly wrong. The U.S. is not the world's policeman. It is not even the world, the hero that the world needs. It's the hero that the world is stuck with because no one else has the nuts to try.
Exactly. Basically. All right.
We'll stand around and let bad things happen to good people, but when it comes time to put a foot in somebody's ass, it seems we're the only ones capable.
Yeah.
And of course, whenever something goes wrong, it's our fault. Whenever something goes right, it had nothing to do with us.
That's right.
Exactly. 11:05 a.m. Beirut time. Turkish officials continue to voice their support for the U.S. missile attack on Syria. Turkey's foreign ministry welcomed the U.S. missile strike on Shirat Air Base following the chemical attack in Khan Shaykhun as very positive. In a written statement Friday, the ministry said steps to ensure that war crimes do not go unpunished and are held accountable will have Turkey's full support. Presidential spokesman Ibrahim Kalin also called the strike an important step, according to Turkey's state-run Anadolu news agency. Kalin repeated Turkey's calls for a no-fly zone and safe zone in Syria so that similar massacres do not happen again.
And once again, Turkey is the fair weather friend of the Middle East. I recall certain issues with the Kurds in Iran where they had the exact opposite position. Gee, what a surprise.
I know. I think they just flip a coin and figure, okay, we'll go this way.
Well, if nothing else, they're self-serving. That makes them at least understandable, if not predictable.
11:20 a.m. Beirut time. The leaders of Germany and France say President Bashar Assad brought American missile strikes upon himself by using chemical weapons. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President François Hollande said in a joint statement Friday after talking on the phone that President Assad alone carries responsibilities for these developments with his repeated use of chemical weapons and his crimes against his own people. The two leaders said their countries would continue to work with the United Nations partners in efforts to hold President Assad responsible for his criminal acts. They call upon the international community to join forces for a political transition in Syria in accordance with the UN resolution.
I just keep waiting for Assad to say, wait, look at the labels on these chemical weapons. These belong to Saddam Hussein. It's not my fault.
Right? 11:25 a.m. Beirut time. Israel's president says the U.S. strike on Syria was an appropriate response to the unthinkable brutality of the chemical attacks in Syria this week that killed dozens of civilians. Oh, boy. Real Rivlin said Friday that the U.S. serves as an example to the entire free world to support steps to end atrocities in Syria. Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman, finally an easy name, said President Trump sent a message that war crimes by Syrian President Bashar Assad would not be tolerated. The country's opposition leader, Isaac Herzog, told Channel 10 TV he does not believe the strike will impact Israel. Israel has repeatedly warned against game-changing weapons reaching Hezbollah in Lebanon from Syria, which along with Iran supports the militant group. It has carried out a number of airstrikes on suspected weapon convoys en route to Hezbollah. Okay, here we go. 11:35 a.m. Beirut time. Syria State TV is showing footage of the U.S. missile strike on a Syrian air base in the country's center, showing a fast sequence of orange flashes that lit the dark sky in the distance before the crack of dawn. The shaky footage, apparently filmed with a mobile phone camera and aired Friday, came hours after about 60 U.S. Tomahawk missiles hit the base in Homs province, causing extensive damage to the base. In a different sequence after daybreak, the Syrian TV station, I ain't even going to try that one, showed another short clip of smoke billowing in the distance, hovering over a raging fire, the tip of which emerges, and a forest of trees is in the foreground. Because, you got to put artistry to this shit. The Syrian government said at least 6 people were killed and several wounded in the attack. Activists say the air base, hangars, fuel depot, and aircraft were badly damaged. A government official said a fire raged for over an hour. Yeah, there are some of these names I ain't even going to try. 11:45 Beirut time in the morning. Russia's foreign minister says no Russian servicemen have been hurt in the U.S. strike on Syrian air base. Sergei Lavrov said Friday that he was unaware of any Russian military casualties at the air base hit by U.S. cruise missiles. Lavrov, speaking on a trip to Uzbekistan, strongly condemned the U.S. strike, saying it violates international law. I love how they keep leaning on that. Russian state TV aired the footage showing the damage from the U.S. strikes at the Syrian air base. It showed craters and pockmarks left by explosions and said that 9 Syrian Air Force jets have been destroyed in the attack. Let's see, 8:55 a.m. Beirut time. French President François Hollande is convening an emergency defense meeting to discuss the next steps in Syria after U.S. airstrikes targeting President Bashar Assad's government. Hollande said he would hold the meeting with top security officials in Paris on Friday as France tries to relaunch international peace negotiations for Syria. He called the U.S. airstrikes a response to a chemical weapons attack that Western powers blame on Assad forces. French warplanes are active in the U.S.-led coalition against Islamic State extremists, and France has long called for Assad's departure, but French diplomats pushed this week for resumed peace talks instead of international intervention. French Foreign Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault, thank God for 2 years in French, said the U.S. bombing was a warning to Assad's allies, Russia and Iran.
Good news. Well, I have to go off and do my field correspondence. I'm told that there are several metric tons of naked robot ladies in Mars. So I hate to say this, but I must be going because there's some sort of friction over there that I have to see. Actually, I just got to go to work. So I'll see you guys later.
Yeah, I know. Have a good day at work.
All right.
Thanks for stopping by. All right, 12:15 p.m. Beirut time. Turkey's foreign minister has called for the removal of President Bashar Assad's regime in Syria while urging supporters of the regime to stop legitimizing it and to help establish a political solution. In a televised statement Friday, Mevlut, whose last name I'm not even going to attempt, expressed Turkey's support for the U.S. missile strike on Syria. This regime must be removed from leading Syria as soon as possible, and the best way to do that is by starting the transitional process, the minister said, whose last name I can't pronounce. Said steps to remove Assad must be decided upon as he refuses to lead while continuing crimes against humanity. Pointing to the possibility of new refugee flows, the guy whose name I can't pronounce reiterated the need for widening safe zones. Okay, if those of you want to tweet out the link to the live stream, please do. And Ronan is in the chat monitoring it because while I'm reading this wire, I can't see what's going on in the Google chat, which is why I'm not typing in it. For those of you who are wondering, let me see, where was I? Because this thing jumped. There we go. And those of you that want in on the chat, let him know. He will let me know, and I can DM you a link provided we're both following each other because, that's the trick. 12:20 p.m. Beirut time. The British government says it was informed in advance about U.S. missile strikes on a Syrian airbase and firmly supports the American action. Prime Minister Theresa May's office said the action was an appropriate response to the barbaric chemical weapons attack launched by the Syrian regime and is intended to deter further attacks. Defense Secretary Michael Fallon says British officials have been in close contact with the American government over the last couple of days, and that Defense Secretary James Mattis informed him late Thursday that the U.S. planned to take military action in response to the chemical attack in Syria. Fallon said Britain, part of an international coalition against Islamic State group in Syria, had not asked to participate in the action. 12:30 p.m. Beirut time. Denmark's Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen has tweeted, "Good that coward assaults on women, men, and children has consequences. The United States has clearly indicated that Syrian President Bashar Assad's atrocities do not go unpunished." And if any of my Danish friends are in the chat, I am sorry for butchering that. I tried my best. Denmark's Foreign Minister Anders Samuelsen said in a live television interview Friday that a line needs to be drawn in the sand when it comes to the use of chemical weapons, adding that Denmark was not briefed in advance. Former NATO Security General and ex-Danish Prime Minister Anders Fogh Rasmussen also tweeted, U.S. drew a red line on chemical weapons. Failure to enforce again would have emboldened Assad and others. On balance, strikes were justified. Phew. Oh, okay, cool. 12:40 Beirut time in the afternoon. Italy says the U.S. strikes on Syria were proportionate given the war crimes committed by the Assad regime in using chemical weapons against its own people. It says the U.S. strikes would serve as a deterrent for any possible future chemical attacks. Premier Paolo Gentiloni says against war crimes for which the Bashar Assad regime is responsible, I believe the images of death and suffering that we have seen in recent days after the use of chemical weapons are images that we cannot accept seeing again. Italy urged Russia to use its influence with Damascus to enforce a ceasefire fire and expressed hope that renewed U.S.-Russia talks could result in a UN-guided political transition in Syria. Italy is a close U.S. ally and has participated in U.S.-led military coalitions in Iraq and Afghanistan. Italy's largest opposition group, the anti-establishment Five Star Movement, condemned the U.S. attack and demanded Italy not get drawn in. The opposition center-right Northern League Party called the strikes a gift to ISIS, the Islamic State group. 1:15 p.m. Beirut time. The UN Coordinator for Humanitarian Affairs says it has no sign that U.S. military strikes against a Syrian airbase have led any direct consequence on overall aid operations in Syria. Oh. Jean's Lerke, I guess. That's one of those names that I'm butchering. Of the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says such violence is not a new feature of Syria's war and cited continued UN-led efforts to reach people in besieged and hard-to-reach areas of the country. The United States launched cruise missile strikes against Shirat Air Base. Yeah, we know that already. UN Human Rights Office spokeswoman Ravina Shamdasani said Friday at a UN briefing that use of chemical weapons, if confirmed, would amount to a war crime. 1:25 p.m. Beirut time. The Russian military says it will help Syria beef up its air defenses after the U.S. strike on a Syrian air base. Of course. Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Major John Igor Konashenkov said Friday that a complex of measures to strengthen Syrian air defenses will be done shortly to help protect the most sensitive Syrian infrastructure facilities. Konashenkov said the combat efficiency of the U.S. strike was very low, adding that only 23 of the 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles reached the Shirat Air Base in the province of Homs. He said it destroyed 6 MiG-23 fighter jets of the Syrian Air Force, which were under repairs, but didn't damage other Syrian warplanes at the base. Konashenkov added that the base's runway also has been left undamaged.
Why do I not believe that?
I don't believe it either. 1:35 p.m. Beirut time. Syrian opposition activists say warplanes have carried out their first strike since a U.S. missile attack damaged a major air base in the central province of Homs. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the airstrike struck the northern edge of the rebel-held town of Khan Shaykhun, where a chemical attack killed more than 80 people earlier this week. The observatory and Turkey-based activist Ahmad al-Ahmad said Friday's airstrike caused material damage but no casualties. They said it was not immediately clear if the warplanes were Syrian or Russian. I love these conflicting reports from everybody. It's just, 1:45 p.m. Beirut time. Top European Union officials are supporting the U.S. missile strikes on military targets in Syria as a means of deterring further chemical weapons attacks by Damascus. EU Council President Donald Tusk said in a tweet Friday that the U.S. strikes show needed resolve against barbaric chemical attacks. EU will work with the U.S. to end brutality in Syria. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, in a statement that he understands efforts to deter further attacks, he said there is a clear distinction between airstrikes on military targets and the use of chemical weapons against civilians. The Kremlin says Russian President, this is 1:55 p.m. Beirut time. Sorry about that. The Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin will chair a meeting of his Security Council to discuss the U.S. strikes on Syria. Putin spokesman Dmitry Peskov wouldn't say if Russia could use its military assets in Syria to protect Syrian facilities in case of new U.S. strikes. He also wouldn't speculate on whether Russia's move to cut a hotline with the U.S. military in Syria could provoke collisions in the crowded skies over that region. Asked if Russia sees Syria as a military ally, Peskov answered positively. He argued Friday that the U.S. attack has de facto served interests of the Islamic State and other terrorist organizations. Because, when you fuck up, you blame ISIS, apparently, I guess. 2:05 Beirut time in the afternoon. A Syrian official says a U.S. missile strike on an air base in the country's center has killed 7 people. Talal Barazi, the governor of the province of Homs, where the base is based, says the Friday dawn attack has also wounded 9. Initial reports said 6 were killed. The attack also caused extensive damage to the air base. The Syrian military called the attack a blatant aggression that would undermine its war on terror. All right, next one. 2:15 p.m. Beirut time. The office of Syria's president is calling the U.S. missile strike against one of its air bases in central Homs reckless and irresponsible. Of course they would. The statement Friday said the strikes were short-sighted and reflect a continuation of policy regardless of which administration that is based on targeting and subjugating people. The statement said the dawn attack on the Shirat air base near Homs was not based on true facts. The U.S. strike followed Tuesday's gruesome chemical attack. 2:30 p.m. Beirut time. Iran's parliament news agency ICANA.IR is reporting that the country won't be quiet after the U.S. missile attack that hit a number of military targets in central Syria. Excuse me. The Friday report quotes Aladdin Bouroujerdi, head of Parliamentary Committee on National Security and Foreign Policy, as saying Russia and Iran won't be quiet against such acts which violate interests of the region. He says serious consequences would follow the U.S. action. Iranian Foreign Minister Muhammad Javad Zarif took to Twitter on Friday to denounce the strike, saying not even 2 decades after 9/11, U.S. military fighting on same side as Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Yemen and Syria. Time to stop hype and cover-ups. The U.S. strike, well, we already know that it's a retaliation. I'm not going to say that again. All right, 2:30 continued. 2 Arab countries in the Gulf are backing the U.S. missile strikes on Syria. The United Arab Emirates, which hosts some 4,000 American troops, said Friday the U.S. had its full support. Anwar Garash, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, praised Trump's courageous and wise decision that mirrored earlier language used by Saudi Arabia. The tiny island nation of Bahrain described the U.S. missile strike on Syria as needed to stop the bloodshed in that country's war. The island kingdom hosts the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet. Rulers in both countries long have been suspicious of Iran and its influence in Syria and the greater region. Both have opposed the rule of embattled Syrian President Bashar Assad. 2:50 p.m. Beirut time. Dozens of members of Turkish trade union carrying coffins have demonstrated in front of the Iranian and Russian embassies in protest of this week's chemical weapons attack that killed more than 80 people in northern Syria. The group of some 250 members of a pro-government union held funeral prayers for the victims of the assault in front of the Iranian embassy in the Turkish capital on Friday before marching to the Russian embassy. They were carrying dozens of black-painted coffins with images of the attacks child victims attached. Iran and Russia are Syrian President Bashar Assad's strongest supporters. 3:05 p.m. Beirut time. The Kremlin says the Presidential Security Council has voiced regret over the damage to U.S.-Russia ties inflicted by the U.S. strike on a Syrian air base. The Kremlin said in a statement carried by Russian news agencies that the senior Russian officials who attended Friday's meeting described the U.S. action as an act of aggression in violation of international law. They keep repeating that. It added that the meeting's participants discussed various issues related to the continuation of Russian Air Force operations in support of the Syrian army's anti-terror actions. The Kremlin said those who spoke at the meeting voiced a deep concern over inevitable negative consequences of such aggressive actions for joint efforts to fight terrorism. Are we? Oh, yay. We're almost done. Okay. 3:15 Beirut time in the afternoon. The Russian military says its facilities in Syria are reliably protected by cutting-edge air defense weapons, a statement that follows a U.S. missile strike. Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Major General Igor, there's that last name again, Konashenkov said Friday that the S-400 and Pantsir air defense systems offer a guaranteed protection to Russian warplanes stationed at the Hemimim air base in Syria's province of Latakia. He added that a Russian Navy outpost in Syria's Mediterranean port of Tartus is protected by S-300 air defense systems. Konashenkov has previously said that the Russian military would help the Syrian military beef up its air defenses following the U.S. strike. Because, you know, that's always smart. Let me see. 4:10 Beirut time in the afternoon. Turkey's president said the U.S. missile strike on a Syrian air base is a concrete step, but argues that it's not enough. Speaking at a rally in the southern province of Hatay, which borders Syria, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said the U.S. Has recently made positive initiatives in Syria that Turkey supports all efforts to ensure the safety of the Syrian people. Referring to the U.S. strikes against Shirat Air Base, Erdogan said, I want to express from Hatay that we evaluate this concrete step against the Assad regime's war crimes using chemical and conventional weapons as positive. But I don't see this as enough, Erdogan said, and repeated Turkey's calls for a terror-free zone to be established. Let us declare a safe zone in northern Syria on the Turkish border, which can be 4,000 to 5,000 square kilometers. Let us build homes there and settle our Syrian citizens, he said. 25 p.m. Beirut time. The U.S. military says 58 of the 59 missiles struck their intended targets in the strike on a Syrian air base. A U.S. official says the initial assessment suggests one of the missiles malfunctioned. The official says the missiles hit multiple aircraft and hardened aircraft shelters and destroyed the fuel area. The official says information is still coming in from the site of the strike. The official is not authorized to discuss initial reports and spoke on condition of anonymity. 4:35 p.m. Beirut time. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada fully supports what he called the United States' limited and focused action in carrying out a missile strike on Syria. Trudeau said in a statement Friday, the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons against its own people cannot be ignored. He says these gruesome attacks cannot be permitted to continue operating with impunity. He also says this week's attack in southern Idlib is a war crime. The U.S. blasted, okay, they repeated that part. President Donald Trump cast the United States assault as vital to deter the use of poison gas. 4:45 p.m. Beirut time. The United Nations Security Council will meet at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a briefing on the U.S. airstrike on Syrian targets, according to the U.S. mission spokeswoman. 5 p.m. Beirut time. This is the last update on the timeline. Syria's foreign ministry is calling the chemical attack that killed scores in northern Syria a premeditated action that aimed to justify the launching of a U.S. attack on the Syrian army. The ministry described the U.S. missile attack that heavily damaged the Shirat air base in the central province of Homs a flagrant aggression. It said in a statement Friday that the real objective of the U.S. attack was to weaken the strength of the Syrian army in confronting the terrorist groups. And that is the timeline through the AP app that I have on my laptop at this time. Whew. So there you have it, the raw timeline without any leans or slants. So, yep, if anything else comes up, I'll probably wind up posting it as a tweet or doing what I can to give you updates during the day. But that's the timeline as we know it. No, it's not off air. Yep, so that's it. And like I said, if there's any more updates, I'll probably wind up, seeing if I could either do another update later on in the day as a video, maybe another live stream, but I've got some writing to do.
Absolutely do another live stream.
Okay, we're going to do another live stream later on. Okay. So yeah, it is, and it surprised me that Trudeau chimed in because, he's been a bit of a puss lately. So, of course, he did wait till well in the afternoon to say anything. So we shall see what goes on there.
Hezbollah says the U.S. missile attack on a Syrian air base is a new crime. Let's not forget, the crimes against humanity that was instilled upon a civilian populace
Yeah.
By an oppressive government.
Yep. Oh yeah. They're not.
And here's 14 minutes ago, the Associated Press for the entire eastern U.S. posted this.
Yeah.
Chemical weapons at issue today in Syria were banned after they killed an estimated 900,000 people in World War I. So they're using something that the United Nations banned after the First World War.
Yeah.
Let's just let that sink in.
Do you think they're actually going to follow the damn rules? I mean, really? If you think they're going to follow the rules, nah. All right, let's see what else we got over here. All right, U.S. strike on Syria is widely hailed, but angers Russia, obviously. Let's see if I can get a few blurbs from this one without repeating too much. Let me see. Nope, it's pretty much the same thing that I read on the timeline. So if I read any of this, I'll be repeating myself. Except for this part at the end, I think. The U.S. had initially focused on diplomatic efforts pressing the UN Security Council to adopt a resolution drafted with Britain and France that would have condemned Syria's suspected use of chemical weapons, but the vote was canceled because of differences among the 15 members. Most of those members saying we can't let this slide, probably, but that's just my opinion.
And that's going to be a lot of up and down things. This is something we're going to have to follow throughout the day to see how the rest of the international community is going to react, and then we can sort it out from there. You'll be able to tell, who's on the right track or who's just spewing obscene rhetoric.
Yeah. This is still breaking news through the AP app, Anchovy. So as we get it and as they change it, we're reporting it. Because as always, new news that just breaks is always going to have, number one, conflicting information depending on who's reporting it. Number two, choppy information because it's coming in as it happens. And number three, a lot of this stuff, even though it sounds legit, needs to be taken as a grain of salt because none of it has been confirmed. We say 58 of the 59 missiles, but none of those have been actually quoted as confirmed hits. They're just saying they did.
They've got a follow-up. Just posted a follow-up on their thing. I'm going to check it out real quick.
Let's see here. Of course, I would say it was. This is an older timeline. Yeah, Assad's office says U.S. strike is irresponsible. Yeah, that's an older timeline. Let's see. Here we go. All right, here we go. Let me see. Here's one that explains the U.S.-Russia line, which protected pilots over Syria. Dubai, United Emirates, Associated Press. A communication link between U.S. and Russian military officials has protected pilots flying missions over the crowded skies of war-ravaged Syria. But now Moscow says it's suspending its cooperation over the missile attack. I'm in the chat. The following is an explanation of the so-called deconfliction line and the possible consequences of cutting it. A U.S. coalition has been bombing Islamic State-held territory across Syria, launching 24 strikes on Thursday alone, according to the U.S. Military Central Command. The coalition includes some 60 countries, with some launching their own strikes into Syria. Russia is waging its own bombing campaign in support of President Bashar Assad's forces, while the Syrian government has its own air force and air defense systems. That means a lot of aircraft are flying in a small airspace, which raises the danger for pilots. In November 2015, for instance, NATO member Turkey shot down a Russian jet fighter nearly sparking an international conflagration. Let me see here. To protect pilots, Moscow and Washington opened a so-called deconfliction line after Russia began its bombing campaign in September 2015. On the U.S. side, it is run out of the Combined Air and Space Operations Center at the vast Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, which hosts the forward headquarters of U.S. Central Command. There, air traffic controllers and senior military officers are in contact with their Russian counterparts in Syria. They share coordinates and other data to avoid mid-air collisions or confrontations. One U.S. pilot flying missions over Syria credited his safety in a recent Associated Press interview. U.S. President Donald Trump ordered a missile strike on the Shirat Air Base southeast of Homs over the chemical weapons attack. U.S. used the deconfliction line to warn Russia ahead of time that the strike was coming. Of the attack, which Syria said killed at least 7 people, Russia announced it would suspend its cooperation in the information sharing campaign, the first time the line has been severed. Russia still has several dozen warplanes and batteries of air defense missiles at its base near Latakia, Syria. So what happens next? Excuse me. U.S. Central Command and the Pentagon did not immediately respond to requests for comment over the Russian decision. The U.S. maintains radar coverage and has other surveillance means to know who is in the air. However, ending the cooperation will mean U.S. and coalition pilots will be flying into Syrian airspace, not knowing if Russian forces plan their own operations in the same places. Air Wars, a nonprofit monitoring airstrikes in the war against Islamic State group, noted that U.S.-led attacks typically focus on areas away from Russian activity, though ending the cooperation represents a worrying development. Well, hell yeah, no communication.
Okay, there's a thing. Oops.
You clicked on the wrong story?
I clicked on the wrong thing. Yeah.
Can you guys hear Ronan okay?
You'll have to tell me if they can or not, because I've got
All right.
something else.
I'll swing this over in your direction.
All right. All right, everybody. This is the latest that I have. 12 minutes ago, this was just released. Beirut. The latest out of Beirut Associated Press. The latest on the events in Syria. 5:50 p.m. Syrian state TV says opposition fighters have fired shells at a government-controlled neighborhood of the capital, Damascus, killing 1 person and wounding 20. The TV says Friday shelling of the Jaramana district occurred in the afternoon. The attack on the capital came at a time when opposition activists reported airstrikes north of the country. 5:30 p.m. Hundreds of protesters performed a funeral prayer in Istanbul for the victims of the Syrian regime's chemical attack on Khan Sheikhon.
Yeah, that's how I said it.
Dude whose name I am not about to fucking even I think that's the same one. His first name is Ahmet.
No, I don't know, but yeah, there's
the head of Istanbul platform consisting of Islamic leading NGOs blame the West for the creation of chemical weapons used in Syria. In this massacre, imperialist West, especially Russia, the U.S., and Iran, are accomplices of cruel Assad, he said. VX gas was invented by the Germans.
Yeah, no shit.
Need to think more about the European theater there, buddy, and learn your fucking history. I'm sorry, never mind. The protesters chanted, "Murderer America, get out of Syria," and "Murderer Russia, get out of Syria," after the prayer. Y'all do know y'all's trying to pick a fight with 2 of the biggest dogs in the yard. Just saying.
Yeah.
5:10 p.m. The UN envoy for Syria tells the Associated Press that his office is in crisis management mode following a U.S. strike on a Syrian airbase. Stefan de Mistura said he was convening an emergency meeting later Friday with the International Syria Support Group's ceasefire task force. He said Russia requested the meeting, which was agreed upon by the United States. The two countries are the co-chairs of the multi-country panel that meets regularly in Geneva. In a text message to the AP, de Mistura said, we currently are in full operational crisis management mode without elaborating. The acknowledgement marked the biggest sign yet that the first international U.S. military action against President Bashar Assad's forces could affect nearly 3 years of peacemaking efforts by the UN envoy. 3 years of getting no fucking where. And you're talking about peace, and I don't care which side it was. One of them launched a nerve agent and killed a bunch of children.
Yeah.
And my policy on that is let's just reboot Scorched Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I apologize if that offends people or triggers some people and everything. I have my own triggering device and everything. The murder of children triggers me to no end.
Yeah.
At 4:45 p.m., the United Nations Security Council will meet at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time for a briefing on the U.S. airstrike on Syrian targets, according to the U.S. mission spokesman. 4:35 p.m. Let's see, that's Justin Trudeau. Okay. So that's basically brings us up to date, because this just keeps going back to the same stuff you've already covered. But again, this is something that I'm going to keep my ear to the ground and see what I can dig up throughout the day. And we were most likely going to have another live stream, hopefully with some panel on this evening and everything, so we can all sit around and discuss this.
Yeah, I saw on Twitter that people kept asking Papaw what he thought. For anybody who doesn't know, I call Bloodwing Papaw because to me he's the Papaw of the internet. Mm-hmm. Everybody's been asking him what he thinks, and I caught him tweeting at a gal going, "I'm a typing youngin', be patient." I said, "You want to come on the live stream? That way you don't have to type." So, oh, he's babysitting. He can't do it right now.
Yeah, that's fine. You know, Bloodwing's one of my favorite people, and he and I see eye to eye on a whole lot of things. And he is a Papaw,
mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure any what I consider a normal human being would be very angry about about something like this, especially when involved, you know, you're killing non-combatants, people that are just trying to survive, while other people argue about who's going to be in charge.
Yeah.
You know, both sides, you know, say, you know, we want this because, you know, this is how it should be. And other sides are going, yes, but your freedom to include, you know, letting terrorist organizations use our land for training grounds. I actually don't care 2 cents about that. What I care about is the killing of civilians.
Yeah,
especially that way, because
hang on just a second. Anchovy, nobody around here uses Wiki because Wiki can be edited to say whatever you want it to say, so we really don't consider, you know, Wiki a firm source. But Ronan will be keeping an eye on this, and if when we decide to do another live stream, we will tweet it out. So keep your eyes on the Twitter, because I'm going to be seeing if I can do some more marathon writing today to get some stuff out, because I really got to do that. So thank you guys for coming and popping in, and hopefully this evening we will have a panel. I'll see if I can get some people on here that want to talk news and speculate as to what's going on. So until then, guys, take care of yourselves, believe nothing, and as always, stay skeptical.